Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. Joe Salustio back with you again here on another episode with, I would say, an amazing combination of folks, guest co-host, first-time guest to talk about the amazing work happening at community colleges today. As you guys know, and I said this to our guest as he came on, one of our mission, I don't call it it's a piece of our mission, is to make sure that we're interviewing people from every sector, every corner of higher education. And one of the areas of higher ed that hasn't gotten talked about, but I think has seen a resurgence in the last couple of years is today's community colleges that we're going to ask our guests lots of questions about what that means today, community college, and the stigma and all that hopefully is leaving. But always honored to have one of our country's community college leaders on the podcast. As you know, the EdUp Experience has been downloaded over 100,000 times. We think we're the first podcast in higher ed to accomplish such a feat. Yes, we've put out a lot of episodes, but you know what? There's a lot of great people to talk to. So you know what? Can't fault us for that. With me today, my guest co-host, you know him. You'll know him by this. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen, the guru of online learning, Bill Pepicello. Bill, what's happening?
Hey, Joe, good to be with you again, as always, and looking forward to a really good interview today.
Same. Bill, are you yet getting tired of the gong?
Joe, I was tired of it the first time you used it.
Oh, you were? Good.
But yeah, I know, which means you're going to continue.
Well, if it makes you feel better, the button is called Bill. It's not called gong. It's called Bill. But you know what? I'm excited too, Bill. We have a great guest with us today. I'm going to bring him right now so that he has as much time to talk as possible. Here he comes, ladies and gentlemen. He's president at Metropolitan Community College. His name is Dr. Larry Rideaux Jr. Larry, what's happening?
Everything's good. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you.
Did you know you were going to get an applause today when you came on?
I didn't, but that was a pretty good applause. So
all right. Well, then we're off to a good start. Larry, you know what? We're always excited to talk to community college presidents because of the amazing work that you're doing. Set the stage for us. Metropolitan Community College. Where are you? What do you do? How do you do it?
Well, I tell you, we're in Kansas City, Missouri, and we're spread out across the metropolitan area. I work and serve in the Northland area of Kansas City. I am the CEO and campus president of MCC Maple Woods. We have 3 additional campuses spread out across Kansas City. We've got MCC Penn Valley, we've got MCC Blue River, and we've got MCC Longview. So, we have been serving this community for over 100 years. In fact, back in 1915, is when we were founded. Back in 1919 is when we began to offer classes in this particular area. And ever since then, we've been working to provide access to community members in the Kansas City area for quite some time. I can tell you, I've been president here at MCC Maple Woods for approximately a year and a half. And no matter where I go in the city and talk with folks about where they've been educated, all of them have something positive to say about the legacy that Metropolitan Community College has had in this community in terms of building community. So we've been doing a lot of great work. We've got a lot of great programs, a lot of great faculty, and we're really proud of the work that we do here in Kansas City, Missouri.
Amazing.
That's a great start. Thank you for that. And I'm going to come out and just ask you, I'm going to whip out what I think is one of the questions of our time for community colleges, which is the stigma. You know what it used to be, but that you go to community college and you were someone that didn't make it, quote unquote, at a university your friend was supposed to go to or whatever. Mm-hmm. And that stigma, I think, has been slowly being dissected and dismantled. How do you see it today? Do you think the reputation, the support, the experience of community colleges is literally evolving into the next level?
Absolutely. I don't just say that, but people that work in my business, we've been talking a long time about making data-informed decisions. And I think when you look at the students that finish here, that transfer to other institutions or even go into the workforce, our students are being successful in terms of whatever decision they decide that they want to make. In fact, it's often said, and we can back it up with good data, that students that start their educational career at community colleges perform just as well, if not better, when they transfer to four-year institutions as those who began their education at a four-year institution. And I believe the reason for that is because we are teaching institutions. We are teaching and learning institutions. We're not so much research institutions. So when you think about it in that aspect, we really put, we put a lot of emphasis in terms of how we go about teaching students to ensure that they acquire and learn the information that's being taught. And as a result of that, many that leave from here, I would couch as being a success, both at four-year institutions and as well as in the workforce. So yeah, I don't think we have that stigma that we used to have, that stigma about being the 13th grade. That's really no longer around. And you don't hear that a lot. I think another thing, gents, is when you consider the fact that community colleges have to be accredited, and they are stringent accrediting standards. And when you meet those overall standards, we're pretty much in essence saying that you're going to receive an excellent quality education, whereby it's going to be able to support you in terms of whatever you decide that you want to do with your future career and life. So when you think about it in that aspect, us having to go through these stringent standards, along with the fact that the people who leave here do just as well as anybody else, regardless of what institution you go to, I think that speaks volumes.
Yeah, that's an important point, and one that it doesn't get brought up enough is the fact that when you're talking about regional accreditation, community colleges are accredited regionally as the same as any other private four-year college or university. It's not like they're standards that say community college standards on the left and other college standards on the right. Everybody meets the same standards of excellence or a quality education. It's how you deliver the services you put around those, but in terms of the curriculum and how you meet those quality standards, it is the same. And same in a good way. Same in a good way, right? And I don't think that gets brought up enough, Larry.
Important, because people need to understand, those in our community need to know that we're being held accountable for what we do. And we're held accountable in a big way. So I think when you understand that, you have parents out there that shouldn't shy away about making a decision about whether MCC Maple Woods or any campus within our community college district is the right choice for them. It is the right choice. And on top of that, it also helps defray the cost of education as you continue to move through. So not only is the quality there, but the quality is there, not having to pay as much as you might pay at a private or four-year institution. So those are things that I think everyone should be looking at.
Bill, you know quite a bit about community colleges. You worked with many in your time.
I have indeed, and thanks a lot. And I know, I think, Larry, that you are under the auspices of the Higher Learning Commission. Isn't that right? And I've worked with every accrediting agency in the United States by virtue of having had campuses in all of them. And HLC is a taskmaster, to be sure. One of the things that I find particularly interesting and gratifying about the community colleges in general is the fact that they are responding to community needs. I think people forgot the word community was in there. And it was interesting as I was looking at Maple Woods to look at some of your programs. And for instance, you have vet tech, foreign language interpretation, and GIS, which I had never heard of until I went on your website. And it's clear that, you've got a basic array of health services and business and so forth. But I'm guessing that some of those majors didn't just come out of thin air, that you are working hard in the community to see exactly what it is that you need to grow and have those partnerships.
That's correct, Bill. Thank you for saying that, because, we take pride in making sure we do our, what we might call environmental scans to see what might be emerging. I think one of the great things about community colleges is that if there's an emerging industry, that we can turn on the dime and we can design and implement programs to meet industry needs. In fact, I was talking with our great chancellor on today, Dr. Kim Beatty, and I was sharing with her the number of data centers that will be coming into the north part of Kansas City. In fact, Google may be sponsoring one of these data centers, and I think Walgreens is also building one of these centers. Now, the point is that, and as I shared with her, that I've got a responsibility to go out and talk with some of these folks, because if they're hiring 200, 500, 1,000 people at these centers, I've got to understand what type of educational background they expect for their workers to have. And as a result of that, we can either begin to funnel students into existing programs that we have that might help them, or we can create new programs to help people receive and earn and to apply and get these jobs that Google and Walgreens are going to be offering, so to speak. So absolutely, it's one of our pluses. It's one of the things that we do well, and we could not and cannot function and be successful without good partnerships with community members and business and industry members as well.
Okay. And I've got one follow-up before I throw it back to you, Joe, and it has to do with community, because in looking at your career, Larry, number one, you're certainly not a person who backs away from a challenge. Having looked at, you were working in Houston and in Brownsville, and I've been.
Yeah. Bill did his research for sure, didn't he?
Well, I was all over Texas for many years. And the move from there to Kansas City has got to have been interesting just from a demographic point of view, because the student body in Brownsville can't look anything like the student body in Kansas City. In fact, it's got to be almost upside down.
It is. Here, we've about 38% of our student population. We enroll anywhere from 13 to 15,000 students per semester, upward of 30,000 students per year. About 38% of those students are students of color each semester. And where I came from in Brownsville, Texas, about 98, 99% of those students were Hispanic, right? And, prior to there, I was at Tarrant County College in Fort Worth, which those demographics resemble similar to what we experience here, just depending on what side of town that you're on. But it is very different here. I mean, even within the Metropolitan Community College District, you'll find that the demographics shift depending on where the campus is. So with me serving up in the Northland, of course, I've got more Anglo students here. Whereas if you go downtown in the heart of Kansas City at MCC Penn Valley, you have more students of color that are there. So as a president, you've got to realize and recognize that, but at the same time, we all still have a responsibility for making sure that we can design access type of avenues. And no matter where you are in this city, you find access to the community college to be relatively smooth, I guess, if you will. But even further, you also have to make sure that no matter where these students are in this city, that we've got a responsibility for helping them succeed as well. So yeah, demographics are different, but the outcomes remain the same. So, right? So that's what we try to keep our mind focused on.
That's great. Joe, I hate to wake you up from your nap, but I'll throw it back to you.
Bill, you're just getting better and better every episode. The more trouble you give me, and I'll get my mute button warmed up for you. Larry, talk about your background just a tad, and besides the fact, well, let me just start over, because I think it's really interesting that you have admissions experience. Interesting because one of the pathways towards a college presidency, as many in the past, and I say past very positively, Bill, if, not that I'm referencing your age or anything, but people in the past who would come specifically in the, of a faculty, dean, vice president of academic affairs, provost, president, would be what the quote unquote traditional pathway to president was. You didn't take that pathway. So you went left, you went right, you went center, you went left again, you went right, admissions, student services, faculty, back to student service. You're all over. I can't even, it reads like a 5-year-old scribbled a roadmap in a good way, because you just touched everywhere. How has that informed your leadership or prepared you for this role that is probably even different than it was when you took it because of pandemic, right?
Right. Is that for you, Bill? Is that for me?
Oh, that's for you, Larry.
Okay.
Bill's career looks like a 5-year-old too, but in a different way,
No, it's a really great question. It's a fair question. My background has been primarily in student services, student development. That's been kind of the scarlet thread throughout my entire career. But I often tell the younger generation of leaders that are coming up, in that it's to all of our benefit to learn as much about the community college and the facets of the community college, the divisions and departments of the community college as possible. Because if you're doing this work proper, and if you're doing this work right, you're not going to be solely just working in silos. So for example, even though I was doing admissions work or advising work or counseling work, we all have to find opportunities to provide and serve in a co-curricular type of way. So how do you infuse student development and student services into something that instruction is actually doing, right? I mean, that's the question. We can go into that, but I won't for the sake of today. But it's important that we work together as a community college to support and to serve our students. So even though that scarlet thread for me was student services, I made it a point to make sure that I work with my faculty and instructional colleagues to ensure that we can bring some things together to inform the student experience, to improve the overall student experience, so to say. So, I've taught in the past. There were things that we've done in terms of providing instructional support for students in terms of tutoring and supplemental instruction. You find ways that will make you more holistic, so that the more that you know, the more that you can apply leverage to the things that you know about in order to get the desired outcome. Remember, I said it's all about the outcome. It's about helping students succeed, helping them succeed in a timely way, helping them meet their educational goals. And I think when you understand that we all have to do this together, that's where the creativity and the innovation comes into play in terms of how we help students succeed together. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense to me. Bill, you want to jump in?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it makes perfect sense. I want to go in a little bit of a different direction, if I may, and I may, since I have the microphone now.
Watch out now.
Okay. One of the things that is I don't want to say it's a rising movement yet, but in a number of states, Arizona is one, Florida is one. I don't know if it's where you are. It's the development of four-year degrees in community colleges. And it's been very controversial here. And I wonder if we get your thoughts on that in general and specific, if it's something that you're dealing with.
Yeah, Bill, that's also a great question. We're very proud of the fact that we were recently approved to offer a four-year degree in respiratory therapy. I believe that's the degree. And, this conversation has been out there for a number of years. And of course, you've got community colleges that are offering four-year degrees. But I think the thought years ago was that since we're about access, if you have a community college and you're a long way away from where someone might be able to pursue a four-year degree in nursing, perhaps the community college ought to consider offering that four-year degree in nursing. In some of my past readings, it's always been that the hope was to put a community college within an hour's drive of every community in the country. I don't know if that's the case at this point, but I know that it's been said. If that's not the case, then I think we want to do everything possible to make sure that if there is a need in a particular area, whether it's for a two-year or four-year degree, then we really need to work to try to provide those four-year opportunities for students. So I'm seeing it happen more and more. I'm really seeing it happen more and more within the allied health field, but at the same time, I'm seeing it in other areas as well. So I think in saying all of that, Joe and Bill, I think you also have to ensure that we are respectful in some way to the neighboring colleges and universities that are in our particular area. After all, you can't always do this, but I do believe that we have to try to play well in the sandbox. So it wouldn't make sense for us to offer a four-year degree in, say, engineering when there's a university right down the street that's offering the same thing. So it can get political. You got to try to make the right decisions. I think you have to be respectful of your educational colleagues, but sometimes everything just kind of falls out and it works out. And it just so happened to work out for Metropolitan Community College to offer this four-year degree in respiratory therapy, considering that no one in this area is actually doing that type of thing. So I'm definitely supportive, but all the stars have to align in order to move forward and make that happen.
The EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. Hey, everybody, head over to www.edupexperience.com. our website, where you're going to find all of the episodes that we've recorded categorized so that you can ensure that you're spending your time listening to the podcasts that are most important to you. You're going to see the reviews of our podcasts, the shows in our network, our partners, and a section on starter episodes. If you're new to the EdUp experience, listen to those starter episodes and get a feel for how the podcast has evolved over time and our impact in the world. www.edupexperience.com.
Sure. One follow-up before I throw it back to you again, Joe. Larry, do you see a move in sort of in the opposite direction for an increase in non-degree and certificate programs, especially those that might eventually lead to, a larger program?
Absolutely. Bill's got some good questions, No, I think about.
I gave him the questions in advance, just for the record.
No, I think about the importance of making sure that I guess some of your pathways are stackable in a sense. You have some people out there that can't afford nor maybe have the time at this hour to pursue a 2-year degree. But if we make it stackable, where they can actually come within reach of, say, a 20 semester credit hour certificate that can put them to work. And then as they're working, perhaps they can come back and begin to work on the next phase of that overall degree to the point where they can earn an associate's and maybe even a 4-year degree. I think it's important. And, colleges across the country are working harder and harder to try to institute those stackable credentials. And not just that, but you got to make sure that people understand what they are, because even though we know what they are, I found that a lot of folks don't realize that they exist and that there is a pathway. And there's a different way of going about doing this to help you get to where you want to go. So yeah, I think it's important. I think we need to do more of it. And I think we need to do more marketing of it once we have those types of things, curricula instituted. So yes.
Well, this is a good point, since I gave Bill the questions in advance and he got the compliment for me to ask. Where's the incorrect button, Bill? Oh, you don't have any sound effects. So whatever I say is true. A little bit of a curveball question for you, Larry. You ready for it?
Sure.
I hit that because it does make me feel like I'm an official game show host. I do enjoy that. But we want to know here at the EdUp Experience, maybe the most important question you're going to receive all month. What is your entrance music, Larry? What's the song that plays at commencement when you hit the stage, in your staff meeting, the living room when nobody's around, that you need to be introduced by? What's that song and why do you pick it?
Oh my goodness. Wow. You guys ask all the presidents this?
Yes. Our last president said, "If I Rule the World" by Nas and Lauryn Hill was our last answer that we got.
Well, there's a song that Jay-Z, right? So there's a song on the Red album that he calls "Show Me What You Got," and I think that would be the song, because it's important for our communities, business and industry. I think it's important for them to understand what our vision is, what our what our strategic plans are, because a lot of folks really don't understand what our niche is. How are we different from a 4-year institution? We're different, but we have our place, and we have a very important place within the overall pathway of education. So when it comes to that song, I'm talking about "Show Me What You Got," because we need to do more of that. We need to help people understand this overall niche, and that we're not competing with anybody. But we are a very important educational option within the overall pathway of education, so to speak. So that's the song that I would actually put out there for you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, if I didn't have the "oh yeah" button at that point, then it's not a point in having the button. Well, let's talk superpowers for a minute, Larry, since your passion is exuding as you're talking about this. You started, it looks like you've been in higher ed forever. Where did the superpowers come from? What's your origin story? How do you even get into higher ed? Because I don't think anybody, maybe if you're faculty, but there aren't too many people you meet that go, I want to work in higher education. You kind of fall into it, trip and fall into it at some point, I feel like. So what's your origin story and what gives you these powers?
Oh, you're absolutely right. I just kind of fell into it. I grew up in the military. My dad was in the Air Force for 20 years. It's what I knew when I graduated from high school. That's what I was going to do. But I had this uncle, my father's brother, who, when I went to their home, I saw these diplomas on the wall. His wife had a master's degree. He had a master's degree, and had a nice house, nice cars. He was contributing to his community. He was serving on the school board. It was a different quality of life than what I understood life to be. And as a result of that, I equated what his experiences were to those little pieces of paper that were on the wall. Even though no one mentored me, no one coached me about it, I knew that the way he was living was in direct proportion with the degrees that he actually had. So instead of going to the military, I decided to give this college thing a go, and I did that. So let's fast forward. Ended up earning my bachelor's, my master's, and my doctoral degree. And somewhere in there, as you said, Joe, I just kind of fell into it. I can remember as an undergrad.
Wow.
And I'll be quick. I can remember as an undergrad, finishing up with a degree in psychology. You really can't do much selling cars. I was looking in the classifieds, and I saw a classified for the university I just graduated from as an admissions representative.
When you used to be able to put ads in a classified, but you can't do that anymore.
Yeah. So yeah, I saw admissions representative. I applied, got the job. And as a result of that, the whole world opened up to me. Being a military kid, everything being on that military installation, when I'm on that university campus, it was like a little military installation. Everything was there. You didn't have to leave if you didn't want to. Dormitories, right? I mean, you can go, there was a place to eat, there was a store, there was a library. I mean, everything was there. So it just really reminded me of growing up in the military. And since then, I mean, I have been hooked on education ever since that particular point. So.
Fire.
That's fire. I want to ask you now, because you led into something it's a really important question that we have always and should have in higher ed about representation. Representation, not only of students and access and diversity, equity, and inclusion in these really big topics, but you personally, as a person of color ascending to leadership in higher education, we know, and it's been discussed on this podcast at length, that there are that by and large, there may not be enough people of color representing the diverse student body in the United States at the highest level. What's the responsibility that you feel to help develop that pipeline? Because you've ascended over a great length of time. And so I would imagine, and of course I'm putting words in your mouth a little bit here and assuming, and of course you can know what that happens when you assume the wrong thing, the saying there, but there's some responsibility you may feel to either open up that pipeline for others, let them know of the struggles you dealt with and all of that. What does it mean to be a person of color as a leader in higher ed, and how do you pass it on?
Yeah, that's another great question. And, I think as president, I think you have a responsibility to ensure that you can be that college president for everybody, no matter what they look like within our community. But at the same time, I do know, what I look like. I know who I am. And I do feel some sense of responsibility to go back out and communicate the message loudly that education is the way to go. So, when I do have the opportunity to serve on boards, to volunteer, to put myself in areas whereby there's a low college going rate of people of color, I'm taking the opportunity to do that. You have to not just walk in who you are, but you also have to make sure that you teach and communicate who you are to those who may not have never seen what I do as an option for them. I mean, it's just like when I graduated from Lamar University, I had no idea that all of these careers were available in higher ed until I got that first higher ed job. I thought the only jobs available in higher ed was to be a faculty member, to teach. And it wasn't until I actually got into it, exposure, access to, that I learned that there were many more opportunities. So when we talk about other young people, traditional, non-traditional people of color, it's about making sure that this is accessible, both in word, in deed, and bringing people within your overall circle to be able to see what this is about, and for them to be able to know that this is also a possibility for them as well. So you have to do that on purpose. You have to be intentional about it. But at the same time, like I said, I'm president for everyone, but at the same time, I do realize who I am and the power that I have in order to influence those who wouldn't think about education as an option for them.
Bill, over to you.
Yep, you used a word, Larry, that sort of struck a chord with me, and that was exposure. Because and I've said this to Joe. In fact, I said it to him recently. A lot of folks have said 80% of life is just showing up. Woody Allen gets a lot of credit for it, but I think Dwight Eisenhower actually said it first. But Joe, you weren't born.
Bill, you got to keep me in the conversation here. You know, bring me back into the 1900s.
That's
it.
it.
I don't know.
Well, when I say the turn of the century, I mean it. But one of the things that, and I think the chord that you struck, Larry, is people notice when you show up. You could be a person of color in a high position, and you don't have to sit on boards, and you don't have to go to public meetings and put yourself out there. But that's what people notice. And more importantly, they notice when you don't show up.
Yes.
And I think that's something that presidents in general sometimes forget. For better or worse, one of the things that was said about me when I retired was that I was always there. I was around, and that was internal and it was external. I served on national and state boards and represented the community. And it was my students, which were a diverse group. But I think people just don't understand the importance of carrying that flag. And it sounds to me like you're really doing a great job of that.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate that.
Let's talk just a little bit about student success, student support services, and the bigger piece of this conversation, which I want to get your direct thoughts on, Larry, which is what is the value of a college degree? Because that's more in question than it's ever been. There's a lot of noise around that situation. We have to do more as institutions to keep students, to help students. There's the pandemic just exacerbated all the problems that really existed before, but kind of twisted the knife, for lack of a better way to say it, on food issues and insecurities and housing and all these things, and then debt on top of it. And is college valuable? Should I go? Shouldn't I go? That's a big topic, and I just put a lot in it with my question. In fact, it was such a horrible question that Bill gave me to ask you. He asked me to ask you this, just for the record. And it has no direction. But honestly, what is the value of a college degree from your perspective? And when someone says, the second part of this is when someone says a college degree doesn't have as much value, you don't need it. Who are we talking about? Who doesn't need it?
Yeah, I just, I think for many, we talked about the quality of life. I think it's important for all citizens. I mean, we all want the best for our families. We all want to be able to invest for our futures. We all want to be, if you got a son or daughter that needs to go on a field trip, to have the financing to be able to support your family, to be able to do those types of things. So, on one hand, that gaining a college education is important because it provides you upward mobility and those types of things. In fact, when we're recruiting folks, we talk about the fact that, what's the salary, what's the earnings difference between an associate's degree, a four-year degree, a graduate degree, so on and so forth. In fact, we've been guilty of using that. And I think we ought to, because it does attract quite a few people to the educational platform. But at the same time, independent of those things, I think when you think about what's the value of education, well, it teaches you to think critically. It teaches you to think analytically. And even if you feel as if education and earning a credential isn't for you, it teaches you how to navigate the life landscape to be able to make a living for yourself as well as for your family. So yeah, it does have earning implications, but at the same time, it has the analytical and critical thinking implications to be able to help you see life in a different way as well. So, I think that the topic, we could talk about this topic for quite some time, and it's relatively complex. But I do believe that everyone has a responsibility to be productive in this life, and whether you do that with a degree or whether you do it as an entrepreneur, or however you decide to do it, we all have those responsibilities, and education goes a long way in terms of helping people understand how they can actually navigate what can be a very complex system of life. Yes.
That's a really eloquent description of the value of higher education. I mean, from my perspective, and I'll use the word perspective, that's the real value. You know, you said, well, I got that psychology degree, and then what was I going to do? Well, that's not really the point. The point was, you know, was that going to get you a job? Maybe not, but it had instilled in you values and discipline. You know, my degrees are in Latin and Greek.
Yikes! Yikes!
And, you know, if I were,
That's direct job, those degrees, Latin and Greek, and they're going to get you a job right away, Bill.
well, you know what, but there's a very nice bridge over the superhighway near me where I could hold my sign that says we'll work for food with those degrees. But, you know, if nothing else in my career, having the perspective of going through that education and learning about different cultural aspects that came along with that, clearly that was, you know, of equal, if not more value than the actual content of the degrees. And I think you spoke to that very well. In fact, I may use that myself in one of our future podcasts.
Thank you.
Well, you know, I want to ask the question to you guys, then just kick it to have a back and forth. One of the, and we could talk about this all day, Larry, because it's almost a systemic type of conversation happening within the U.S. in particular. And I go, is this a dangerous conversation to have with all of the young folks, even adults who are looking to go back to school to gain new skills, that you don't need to go to college, that you don't need a formal education? Because you just wonder, you know, and we talked to oh boy, she was dynamo, Darion Pollard from Nevada State College. She was just like an atomic bomb dropping of energy. And she was like, yeah, I'll give me 10 Elon Musks and 10 Bill Gates, and I'll show you, 10,000 students that if you tell them college isn't for them, it's going to destroy the rest of their lives potentially. And is this a dangerous conversation that we're having in the U.S. and who is it going to hurt? Because I'll tell you right now, I mean, I went to college. I am having these conversations maybe more than most about college degrees. I'm having it with presidents all across the world, and I'm going to send my kids to college. I don't care if they don't want to go. I'm going to force them to go. But who are these people that are just going to go, yeah, I don't want to go? And what demographic are they from? And where's this danger? Are we going to lose a generation, you know?
And, Joe, I think, another thing we've got to remember is that, our whole employment system, just about, I mean, I don't have the data, hadn't read anything as of late, but when you think about our whole employment system, no matter what sector that you're in, it's built on receiving people into it who have received some type of formal education, maybe not everything. So even though we've got people talking about, hey, we may not need a degree in order to move forward in this particular area, well, maybe you don't, but a whole heck of a lot of business and industry will require that education. And in a period where competition is everything, we compete for everything. If you've got someone competing for a degree, competing for a job that doesn't have a degree versus someone who has a degree in that particular area, I'd like to say maybe 9 times out of 10, the person with the degree and the experience may get that over a person that doesn't have that degree.
Even if you say a degree is not required, it becomes a differentiator, and that's just by nature of comparison.
Absolutely. And then, you also have to remember that people like myself, those of us that work in education, we're talking with people out there in the community, business and industry all the time. It's like I noted earlier today. I need to talk to Google. I need to talk to Walgreens. Let me find out what type of educational requirements they need of employees. I'm doing that every day, so it's not going anywhere in terms of people needing education to acquire good jobs. You may just have certain pockets out there that may not, but I think that pocket will be relatively small, and those who feel as if they don't need a formal education will probably find that it's harder to acquire.
The argument, right, Bill, is always it's too expensive. College costs are too much. And that could be true depending on the institution that you're talking about. And just like I said in a previous episode, Larry, we're talking about when somebody says students, there has to be some kind of qualifier before it, because there's adult students, there's traditional students, there's students, some college no degree students, there's students all over the place that if you just use a blanket statement, you don't sound like you're educated and talking about the right thing. And that also, to me, goes for college is expensive. Yes, it can be if you make the wrong choices, but it's also extremely economical if you do make the right choices.
True, Joe. And, we're not saying that you shouldn't be strategic when you're getting ready to go to school and determine what you want to major in. I mean, if you're staying on campus and you're going to one of the most expensive four-year institutions and you want to be a teacher, well, out the gate, teachers are going to make $46,000, but yet throughout your 4 years at that institution, you may finish owing $200,000. You have to be strategic. And I think this conversation, you can't remove that part from it, and that it does require some thought. And unfortunately, you really have to make some financial decisions about where you want to go, what you want to be, and what your debt is going to be at the conclusion of you earning that credential, right?
Yeah. Bill, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's an excellent point, Larry. And I think it speaks to some of the things that we've discussed, such like certificates and stackable credentials, because that's strategic. And even if you want to be a teacher, you can do that in steps. But you also have to make the decision, as you did and I did, and Joe has to some extent. If I'm going to teach, okay, I'm not going to be rich, and are you okay with that? There was I remember very well, one time I was at a all staff meeting in Salt Lake City. And a young girl, she was from admissions, because admissions people are always a little rambunctious. And she stood up and said, well, you know what? I can make more money working at the furniture store down on the end of the block than I can working for you here in admissions. And I simply asked her, well, what time does that store close? And she told me, and I said, well, if you hurry down there right now, you can probably get your application in, because clearly that's where your priority is. I came back 6 months later for another all-staff meeting there, and she was gone.
That's why he's the guru, ladies and gentlemen.
And this point goes to you, Joe. You might want to edit this podcast, because someone who hears you talking about abusing your children and forcing them to do things is very likely to call Child Protective Services. So you just be careful there.
You're going to go to college. Darn it. You're going to go to college, and that's it. Yeah, I'll tell you, Larry. This is you've been an amazing guest. We like to close our episodes with a final two questions we ask to every single guest. Number one, what did we miss about MCC that you want to say today? Event happening, speaking engagement you have, anything at all? I'm giving you ideas. Anything you want to say about MCC, and then secondarily to that, what do you see as the future of higher education?
Well, I think that what I'll say is that, our chancellor and the presidents and other leaders within our institution, we're really working hard on our diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda. It's really important. It's being talked about across the country because a lot of the most recent events that have happened throughout our country, but it is being addressed in universities and colleges. So as a result of that, we are setting up the framework, the governance, the education that's required to help people think a little bit more about the importance of equity and how do we exercise strategies for equity within our overall institution. So I do want to say that. I think just in terms of the future of education, of course, you're right, Joe, it's changing. It's changing quite a bit. I think when you look at headcount enrollments in universities and community colleges, they're not what they used to be. When the unemployment rate is high, people come back to school. When it's low, they don't. And I think there is a disturbing trend when it comes to enrollments in our colleges and universities that we really have to try to turn back the clock on. We've got a lot of brick and mortar here. We've done education in a very traditional way over the years. And I don't think you'll find anybody who says that we don't want to continue to do that, but at the same time, still exercise in offering education by way of, say, online or virtual or things of that nature. So, I think if anything, in the future, now and into the future, we have to give making sure that we can continue to bring people to our campuses to be educated. So.
Wow. Well said. What a great episode. Larry, thank you. And I'll thank you in a second, but I first want to thank my guest co-host today, Dr. Bill Pepicello. In fact, I'm not going to hit the gong button for you on the way out, Bill, but I'm going to thank you in another way. I mean, a little underwhelming, but maybe more appropriate than the gong.
Well, if you have a golf clap there, that would also be nice.
In fact, I do, Bill, but in fact, I do.
Oh, no.
But, let's not grandstand today. Our guest, eloquent, well-spoken, motivated, passionate, fill in any other amazing adjective you have. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Larry Rideaux Jr. He's president, Metropolitan Community College, Maple Woods campus. Larry, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It really has been an honor to host you.
Pleasure to meet the both of you. It's been an honor to know both of you, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd.